talking about gentrification that happens along transit corridors, and it's a big problem because it's a double-edged sword. People that are working class need public transportation, but as transportation corridors get built up, that land becomes so much more valuable to develop. So honestly, what happened here in Charlotte, especially along the Blue Line, you see how politics got in the way. When the initial Blue Line was built and was being planned, it went to a referendum, and the people of Charlotte voted against it. But the city council at the time, took their own wisdom and said, no, in order to be the Charlotte that we needed to be, we're going to push this through. And I think that was a good thing. But they tried to have their cake and eat it too. Those folks on city council, they could have made an ordinance that said, when you develop along this corridor, you have to include affordable housing or diverse price point housing so working people can do that. They decided not to because it was, again, that kind of compromise to be this business-friendly town. And what that resulted in is that we have a Blue Line that is really increasingly difficult for working class people to take advantage of that resource that it was supposed to guide them in. So like I said, this is why it's a generational thing. We do have a 2030 plan that if we're aggressive and we get some good work from different levels of government, that we can still do. But we have to be forward thinking. As we look at those routes, we're going to have to buy up that land as a city, as governments, to ensure that we can develop affordable housing, because that's the only way we can ensure that that gets done. We live in a state where what's called where we cannot make policy. It's called inclusionary zoning that other cities have that say if you develop, you have to make a certain level at certain price points. We can't do that because of the way our state is governed. We can only do that if we own the land. Like I said, it's going to take a commitment from government over generations to make sure things like transit-oriented development is something that is affordable for most Charlotteans and not a select few. So diverse price point housing, building good neighborhoods has really been the fulcrum of the work of City Council over the past year or so. We've done a lot of things that really have been unprecedented. On the November ballot, the people will be voting on the largest municipal bond to fund our housing trust fund that has ever happened. Since it was formed in early 2000s, traditionally that bond has been $15 million and it would get renewed every 2 years. We have a $50 million bond on the table. So it'll more than triple the existing housing trust fund. We have also gone into, we've had commitments from the Foundation of the Carolinas and other corporate entities to create a matching fund of private money that will at least match that $50 million. So at the end of November of this year, I believe we will have north of $100 million, probably something around $125 million to use over the next 2 years, where before that we only had $15 million. But there are other things that are going on. I mentioned transit-oriented development before. We are going through a huge process called the UDO, or the Unified Development Ordinance, that is going to take all those pieces, those development ordinances that have kind of been Frankenstein over the years, some that have not been touched in 40 plus years, that have the legacies that go back to federal redlining and Jim Crow and things like that. So we're completely redoing that part, but that is really kind of, the UDO will be kind of the horse that pulls the cart. We have to get that cart out of the barn as well. So we have committed to kind of slowing that UDO process down because what we have to do is come up with a vision of what our city is. We don't have a comprehensive vision to develop our city. And so what you have is, over time, in my opinion, you have what I like to call selling to the highest bidder. Those that have ideas and have the money to fund it can just come in and do that. And that, again, leaves so many people out of the process and then ultimately out of the picture. So we're going full steam ahead on that comprehensive city vision, which is going to take a lot of public input and support to make that happen. It'll probably be a 3-year process, but we're pushing that forward right now. In the meantime, we are doing things like getting the transit-oriented development zones and districts kind of put forth so that as we're making land use decisions, we can have better guidance and more tools in our toolbox. Along with going back to that housing trust fund, what we recently just passed and adopted was a framework for how that money will get spent. One of the things that I was very important to me and a lot of my colleagues was that we didn't want to just get a bucket full of money of taxpayer dollars and say, oh, we can just spend it any way we want. No, now we actually have guidance and tools for how that money should get broken up and how that should be pushed forward. But that's just a toolbox. A toolbox and tools don't do anything if you don't come with some type of blueprint to follow. So we're continuing to work on that to mesh all of those moving pieces together. But again, when we look at talk about affordable housing and economic inequity, you can't look at one thing, because you can't build enough units if you don't have the jobs out here, if you're not paying people enough to afford housing. Regardless of how many units we buy. So we're going to continue to put pressure on private communities and corporations to say, hey, we need to keep up with the times right now. You know, I mean, I have bus drivers and I have sanitation workers that are living out in their cars because they can't get an apartment in Charlotte. And there's so many different levels to that. They have good paying jobs, but they might have made mistakes in their past. We have to look at how we deal with incarceration, because there are too many people that find themselves back in jail because they find themselves homeless. And they have to break laws so that they can protect themselves as they sleep at night. Trespassing or whatever you may call it. So there's no one silver bullet to this issue. It has to be a wraparound response, not just from government, but from all of us as a community.